Began as an acronym in the head of a Goldman Sachs analyst is now a full-on multilateral alliance, BRICS. The group's leaders will meet in South Africa today, being Tuesday, for a 3-day-long summit in the commercial capital of Johannesburg. The core of the BRICS nations are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They represent a quarter of the global economy. While major emerging economic powers, it's not the happiest of families, but nonetheless, that family is now entertaining formal bids from nearly 24 countries to join their bloc. Discussions around adding new members are expected to figure high on the agenda of the summit. The latest meeting of BRICS leaders, with the exception of Russia's Vladimir Putin, will be the first in-person gathering since the pandemic. And with me here in studio to break all this down is Daniel Sheikh, the former Israeli ambassador to France and a political commentator. Daniel, good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is the 15th BRICS summit, and the theme is supposedly BRICS and Africa, and it comes as the continent sort of emerges as a renewed diplomatic battleground between China, the United States, and Russia. The big question, who's winning and why does it matter?
Well, why it matters, I think, is nearly self-explanatory. It is a huge continent, and it is a continent that still has huge economic potential for growth. I remind you that BRICS was created among what was then considered to be the emerging economies. They were large economies, but they were considered emerging. Today, it's a little bit more difficult to define this group because you have, on the one hand, China, which is on its way to becoming the #1 economy in the world, and on the other end, you have South Africa, which is struggling with economic problems, with significant economic problems. So I think Africa will be an issue, but the biggest issue is what is actually BRICS headed to become. Many think that the leaders of BRICS would like to sort of resuscitate what used to be the non-aligned group of nations, which is a little bit fits into the situation that we have today of many countries that do not want to choose sides. They don't want to necessarily, in the discussions or the conflict between Russia and the US or China and the US, they don't want to choose sides. They want to benefit from both, from all of them. And many of these countries that are both in BRICS and candidates to become members of this group have adopted this kind of diplomatic approach.
And speaking of conflicts and choosing sides, a bit of an awkward meeting considering the fact that Vladimir Putin, Russia's president, will not be in attendance. But more so than that, it appears that the summit, or at least the group, sort of has a coherence problem. I'll remind the viewers that India and China have almost gone to war. At the moment, Russia's under Western sanctions because of its war in Ukraine. And more so than that, India and Brazil are technically aligned with the West. So how does it come forward as possibly presenting a non-alliance movement when it's so much has an issue almost with this representation to begin with?
The very short and blunt answer, Batya, is they don't. It doesn't. There is no coherence there, but that doesn't mean that you can't find some kind of common ground. There are all sorts of ideas, some of them a little far-fetched, like the idea that has been floated of creating a common currency for the BRICS that would compete with the dollar, in order to undermine somehow the predominance of the US dollar in world financial markets. Seems today like a completely crazy idea, but it is being discussed. You're talking about competitions, even on the very continent where in Africa, where this summit is taking place, China and Russia are really competing economically, militarily, in many ways, politically. So yes, there is a question of coherence, but it's sort of a grouping of countries that they don't want to choose sides. They don't necessarily want to choose sides, so they'd rather use their economic clout. You gave the numbers. They are very impressive, both demographically, economically, militarily. These are heavyweights, at least the ones that are the core now. if they will want to accept one of or many of the 20-something countries that have actually applied to become part of this group, that would turn it into something that will have to be reckoned with.
And perhaps while they are trying to suss out exactly what it is that they stand for and what the alliance would like to become, you mentioned that there's 20 plus members or countries that are vying to enter the group.
Correct.
Some of those include Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, countries in the Middle East. Who is likely to actually get a formal invitation and an acceptance? What does this membership even look like?
It's a good question. My guess is that there won't be an immediate acceptance into the inner circle. They might want to create some kind of, I don't know, an outer circle of members that are not full members but are supporters of BRICS, or some kind of intermediary situation. We'll have to see. Here again, among these 20-something countries, there is a huge diversity in the level of development, in the level of economic capabilities, political clout, regional influence, etc. It's really, there's very little uniformity here.